So, Hardik, it's been such a privilege being able to get to know you, work with you for over a year now, and watching your success and your wife's success through this program and all the action items you've taken has been really inspiring. And so, what I'd like to do is have you tell us a little bit more about what you do, your occupation, what do you and your wife specialize in, to kind of open it up at a high level. And if you want to trickle in, what was your tax situation like before meeting us? And and specifically, was it a challenge finding a firm that could work with you in your unique situation? So, kind of a three-part question, and one just at a high level.
Hmm.
Tell us a little bit about you, your wife.
Yeah,
What was your
yeah,
tax situation like prior? And then, did it take some time to find a firm that you could
yeah,
work with and partner with short term and long term?
absolutely. So, hi everyone. I'm Hardik Gandhi. Um, I'm a project manager. I'm working at one of the tech companies located on the East Coast. My wife is a physician, so both of us are high income earners. And Alec said, our tax situation, both of us are high income earners. So we thought we are earning good money, but a significant portion of the money or the earned income was going towards the taxes actually. We had a CPA for a while, and we were happy working with this person for a couple of years, and we thought that person would know all the tax scores and all the strategies and everything. So we would employ that person at the end of the year, and person would do a good job, file and report the taxes, and we would get the refund if we paid more, and we would pay taxes to government if we paid less through the year. um, so that was our, a high level story, before we hired a tax saving expert and work with Alec, really. In our situation, because, we have a unique visa situation, it definitely took us a while to hire and trust a firm that we can employ and work with comfortably. And when we first spoke to Alec's team, we definitely felt a connect with, some of your sales team who understood the technicalities and what is legally possible and what is allowable, and what could it look like in our personal financial landscape in terms of tax savings, but also for overall wealth compounding. So it was very evident for us, when we hired you guys, what is possible. You guys were transparent, and that was a moment for us to hire you back in last year.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate those updates and, thanks for all the details there. One of my questions follow up was why did you commit to working with tax saving experts? I think you did cover a little bit, but I want to
Mhm.
ask it again. Maybe just, one or two of the highlighted points. Why
Mhm.
did you commit to working with tax saving experts?
Yeah, so I think, like I said, before working with tax saving experts, we were doing the taxes as part of the yearly, tax filing. We would never thought taxes as the year-round strategies or part of our wealth building. So for example, TSE helped me understand. Instead of asking a question like how much do I owe to government, you guys actually educated me and brought a financial security in my family, and we start to ask different questions in the family. What can we do throughout the year, that allow us to legally save taxes and also allow us to, let's say, earn passive income? So, for example, one of the things that you guys helped me with, is you showed us the plan where we are not only saving the money in the retirement account, but how can we leverage that these different, assets that we have, for example, the retirement money, your brokerage account, your shares, multiple cars that you have, real estate, any numbers of different things that we have. You guys look at this very carefully and showed us the strategy. What can we do to leverage these assets to go after taxes? So basically, I was not coming out of the pocket as I enrolled in the program, but my assets were leveraged in a way. In my particular situation, I had a I had a second car which I did not think could help me save taxes. And you brought this idea up to me. We leveraged a second car. We started the business out of this, second car, entrepreneur spirit, and that allow us to go after taxes. And for me, it was very clear when I understood, once you set up the business, there are numbers of deductions and depreciations that comes along with having a business. And I built a muscle memory while going through this journey, which I'm forever grateful of. So we changed the question in our family: what can we do legally car was just one example, but now we are going after more assets, leveraging more assets, and generating enough passive cash flow that allow us to live comfortably. For example, after we generate cash flow from all these different assets, we even go after the wealth building strategy. For example, life insurances, charitable contribution, or even going after the computer systems, and that eventually brought down our taxes to a single digit versus previously we are paying on the highs of 40%. That was quite a achievement to end the year with all this education that we had with your company.
That's amazing. Going from a much higher tax bracket down to single digits,
Yeah.
incredible. Um, Hardik, what's been the biggest value you've received? If you could highlight one thing, what's been the biggest value you've received from working with myself, our team tax saving experts, and how did that positively impact your family situation?
Yeah, so I think absolutely I can circle back to some of these. So the biggest value would be we changed our everything we do in our life. We ask a different question now, right? Previously, we were just we are always pushing for we need to make more, we need to save more to to generate a financial legacy. Now we ask a different questions in the family. Whatever we do, how can we structure this thing? How can we leverage the asset in a way that it not only gets us the tax savings, but also generates free cash flow. It appreciates in value and allow us to go after even more assets, purchasing more assets. So we completely changed the question, in our family and structuring that into our overall financial planning. For example, with our retirement planning, with our brokerage account, with our life insurance, with our health savings account, and it becomes part of our broader financial literacy instead of just talking about taxes in December and and thinking it is somewhat complicated thing because there is so much out there in the internet. Sometimes it is very vague or very complicated, but education that we got from your company, it becomes like a conversation during the every family dinner, every vacation, or everything we do is around the education and becomes like a part of our life instead of just doing things once a year.
I love that. Yeah, that's amazing. Thank you for that feedback. Another specific question. What held you back from the past from taking action to reducing your taxable income? And why did you trust tax saving experts to work with us and now continue to work with us?
Yeah, so I think absolutely I can answer that. So what stopped us? Really we thought we have hired a CPA who would know all the tax situation, all the tax scores. Who would look at our earned income, look at our investments and different assets that we're investing in, and recommend us the optimal tax strategy. At the end of the year during the tax filing. Guess what? We were wrong. you know uh, it was not that what it is not what stopped us. It was the lack of education that we were not proactive throughout the year. Actually, the taxing only comes if you take action. You become actionable. You take you talk about this thing. You ask questions. You work with the professional who understand the tax code, and they advise you on different strategies throughout the year that allows you to go after these deductions. So that's part of your answer. um,
Yes. Yeah, thank you, Hardeep. And then I think you tied in, the trust aspect. Why did you trust tax saving experts? I think
mhm.
you answered it a little bit
Yeah,
earlier. Do
yeah,
you want to
yeah.
expand on that at all, or no? It was just,
Well, so well, I can definitely expand on the trust aspect. So trust does not just come from the conversations that you have once a year with the team. Trust comes with, when you speak to a team, like let's say on a weekly, monthly, or on a frequent basis, and there's an action being taken as a reciprocal. So I was working with the CPA. I would talk to the person once a year. I was still trusting a person because I never got audited. But with tax saving experts, I was talking to your team like literally every single day. The way you designed the process, the daily calls where I can approach the coaches, ask my questions. There is you, I can just text you or reach out to you anytime. If I cross a situation, I can call you and you advise me on things that matters to me the most. So it is really the continuous conversation, action taking, improvements, decision making, and realizing that yes, it is yielding into real savings, right? That is what you led the big trust factor throughout the last year. and then even more building this year.
Awesome. So what I'm hearing is, the trust has built over
Yeah,
time. When you first started with us, right?
yeah,
It took time to develop, but when you showed up consistently,
yeah.
daily, sometimes multiple days in a week, we
Hmm.
built a trust over time by putting the game plan in place with you taking action, of course,
Yeah,
owning your own tax liability situation, which is what we really lean on from a coaching perspective. But essentially, that's what's allowed you to trust in us,
yeah,
our team, to continue working with us year after year.
yep, yep,
So.
exactly, yep.
Awesome. Well, Hardik, if somebody's watching this interview right now and they are on the fence, they don't know who we are.
Hmm.
Like,
Hmm.
hey, there's tax saving experts, there's this local guy, there's somebody else I'm finding on the internet. What would you want to tell somebody listening to this call right now?
Absolutely. I mean, so I work with your company, for more than a year now, and I'm a repeating client. So I can definitely say, I'm very happy with the services, transparency, and all the different initiatives and the processes that you guys have put together. I was reactive. I think I said it, multiple times. I was reacting in my approach to the taxes, but now I become more proactive. You guys showed me how much as a high income earners, we all have on the table, and how much I was missing by just not leveraging and connecting all these different dots. Now I can see things very differently. I'm not just going after tax strategy, but more so tax optimization, leveraging the cash flow I have, and going after a financial legacy, that I am forever grateful to. And I think you guys have, programs which covers the somebody who just wants to be, let's say, wants to do, let's say, the simple stuff or simple things, and just want to save taxes. You guys also have program for somebody who wants to, let's say, save taxes and go for the cash flow. And also you have a strategy, let's say, somebody who wants to save taxes, cash flow, charitable contributions, building assets, going after real estate, and really expanding their portfolio on n numbers of different things. I think you guys are covering a lot of different strategies, so people can, have a, you know a, a catering menu, that they can choose from. Hey, I want to go after these two things because that's what I understand, and everything else you can, you can ignore. Somebody wants to go after everything, you can still go after everything. Your fees does not change. It's a beautiful part of the program. It's a one-time investment, and clients get to choose, different strategies from the menu. I think that's a really powerful, to not having blindfolded, just to show limited things. You guys really show the full menu and let clients decide what is good for them.
That's awesome. Hardik, let's two more questions for you. Number one, how does the investment and the value you've received compare to other investments you've made into other coaching programs, other,
Mhm.
life ventures? What was the value you received in the investment altogether compared to
Mhm.
other investments in the marketplace you've made?
Yeah, I think that's a very simple. I mean, the investment I made with the company, was really first of all, investment, one-time investment for the education that I paid for. But also, that education was, now built into our family conversation. So not only myself, but all the future generations, my partners, my kids, everybody is benefiting from the education that we got, and everything we're doing in the family, now has a different question. Right? What can we legally do, or how can we structure this legally? Not only go after taxes, we're also building wealth, optimize our taxes, not for this year, but also for the future years, right? So if I just have to do the ROI, I think it's close to infinite, because it's a one-time fees, but you generate returns on that, every single year. That compounds until I die, and I pass on to the players, who get this, really nice package, nice booklet that they can live off of. So I think that's really powerful to invest in something in your education, which is actionable and gets you result in a literally in the same year. I think it would be a
Very
pity that somebody who doesn't engage is and think, to get this education. It is not that difficult. Uh, People online makes it so difficult, like, or so complicated or confusing. But you guys have, the process and the documentation and, things that made so simple that I think the return is close to infinite.
Wow. Close to infinite value on the investment with
Yeah,
us. That is
yeah,
very powerful. And I
yeah.
appreciate you saying that. And you stole the thunder on my last question. My last question was going to be if you never met us a little over a year ago, if you never moved forward, now knowing what you know, what would that have costed you if you never took action over, 1, 3, 5, 10 years or over a lifetime? Now that you know what you know, what would
Hmm.
that cost to look like to you? And again, I think you kind of answered it
Yeah.
prior, but that was my last question. So,
No, I'm definitely. I think I can circle back and give some specifics. So, like I said in the beginning, my overall liabilities, tax liabilities were in the above 40%, and I brought it legally down to close to 10%. That 30%, that's a lot of compounding that I was missing on the table just by not having the education, and that money, was the biggest drag on my portfolio. Now that I have understood, I'm leveraging the 30% year on year and going after more advanced strategies, talking more freely, planning more comfortably, and the cash and knowing that the cash flow is there. You have a real assets that this community allows you to build, which generates cash flow independent of what market does. It goes up, down, or sideways. You guys have strategies that gives you a fixed amount of cash flow month on month. That's really powerful that you can live off of very peacefully and plan your life around these strategies actually. So I would say it's really the loss is pretty significant not having this education, because it's like I said, it's one time and it compounds year on year, and sometimes even more frequently, if you don't understand what questions to ask.
amazing. Well, Hardik, as you know, it's been an honor being able to have you a part of our community as a client, working with you throughout the year. It's been really enjoyable and really proud of you to see your transformation.
Thanks so much, Alec. Always
Thank
appreciate it.